All right.
Okay, so, well, hello everyone, and we're so glad to have you here with us today. We have an absolute special guest with us, Aliqa, who's going to introduce herself more formally and tell you all where she's from and share some really incredible things about her and her community and her life. And I just want to remind folks that you are welcome to ask Aliqa questions. You'll notice in the description box below on the YouTube link that you're watching in, if you go to the description box, there is a link to click on and you can ask your questions there. We'll try to get through all the questions as best we can. Apologies if we don't get through all of your questions, but we'll do our very best. So thank you, and I'm turning it over to Aliqa now.
Hi, everyone. My name is Aliqa Illauq, and I am originally from a place called Kangiqtugaapik in the Qikiqtaaluk region of Nunavut. Sounds like a mouthful, doesn't it? But that is in Canada. The first time I went to the South and I went into high school, the vice principal actually thought that I was from Russia when I said that I was from Kangiqtugaapik. And I will show you shortly on the map where that is. But any guesses? Can you pinpoint? So I am Inuk, or a human being. Inuktitut in my first language. Inuk literally means a human being, and Inuit mean people. So it's kind of funny when people ask me what I am. So instead of saying human, like everybody else, it's like everybody wants me to put a label. Kind of silly. All right. I am a mother of 3. My oldest is 15 and my youngest is 9. Right now, I live in Iqaluit, which is the capital of Nunavut, and it's like +3 today, and it's really warm. It's been reaching 30s and stuff, which I can't even imagine right now. I'd be dead with a lot of mosquitoes. All right, so I'm going to share my screen. What happened? I don't know where that thing went. Hold on. Where's the presentation? What's happening? It just
might take,
worked.
maybe it might, oh yeah, I see that. It just says nothing. Has started screen sharing. Yeah, strange. Do you want to stop and try sharing again?
Let's see. This is so funny. We're back to Zoom things, everybody. So funny. Let's see. Anything? Nope. Hold on. This is so funny.
Yeah, because it was just there.
Yeah, it was. Is it? Like it was just showing like a minute ago. This is so funny. In the meantime, maybe I will tell you guys what I did the past couple days. So there's still the Arctic Ocean that is frozen, and I'll show you guys pictures as soon as this shows. And I was actually dog sledding across the frozen Arctic Ocean just yesterday and the day before. And it's been really beautiful. And we've been going really late because in the summertime, spring and summertime, we have 24-hour daylight. So you can be out at 2-3 o'clock in the morning and it's dusk right now. And a lot of people have a really hard time imagining that. So that's pretty cool, right? I'll show you pictures in them. I think I figured it out. Let's see. Did it work?
Yes, there it is.
Oh, good. Hold on. I just gotta. Let's see, it's loading. There, can you see my screen?
Yay! It's on.
Amazing. All right, so this is Nunavut. This is Inuvaluit. This is Nunavik, and this is Nunatsiavut. And these are referred to as Inuit Nunagat, Inuit lands. And the Arctic Circle is about here, it goes like this. And right now I am in Iqaluit, which is the capital, but I am originally from Kangiqtugaapik, or also known as Clyde River. And it's right across from Greenland. So it's really, 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 really high up. And these are all of the communities, all in Inuktitut, syllabics, as you can see, and then Qallunangayok, and then Qallunatitut, English, Inuktitut, and Roman or Gurthi, whatever, however you say it. So this is where I grew up, and Toronto area is way down there. You can't even see it on the map. And my father was born from these two. These are my grandparents, or sorry, my great-grandparents. And this was taken in the 1930s, I'm pretty sure. We're not 100% sure. And this was taken where Kangiqtugaapik is now, because when my father was a newborn, there was no towns like we saw like this. These towns were just starting when my dad was born. This is a sealskin, and right here is called a qammaq, which was a home. The rifles, of course. And the family camp, as you can see, they started getting in contact with leaders. So people explored whalers that went to Inuit Nunagat. So that's pretty cool, right? So a little bit of my great-grandparents. This is a tupik, and this is what my father lived in when he was growing up. And it's a tent, and it's made out of hide. This one's made out of seal hide, and then the door is from driftwood, because there is no trees up there. So the only wood that we would have is that would come from the ocean. And it was taken in 1936, where the community is now. And later I will show you all what the community looks like today. And this is an igloo, or iglubigak. And my father was born in one of these on the Arctic Ocean in December. So it was really, really cold. And my father's biological mother passed away giving birth to him because she lost a lot of blood. And there was no bottles and there was no baby food, how we can get at the store today when my dad was born. So my dad was actually fed with a seal broth. So in the igloo, there would be 2 qulliqs, they're called. And I wish I would have lit mine and you guys could see, but it's really hard on Zoom. But it's a seal oil lamp that Inuit invented, and it gives Inuit warmth, light, and cooks our food and everything. So that's how my dad was able to stay alive, is with seal broth. And a lot of people, I think, have a hard time understanding or even imagining that when my father was born, there were no stores and there was no planes and there wasn't all these cool things that we have today, especially the internet. And my dad has seen a lot in his life. He has seen many changes. My father remembers the first time he saw a white person, because he was completely of the land, and that's how he grew up. We don't know how old my dad is. For a long, long time, we thought he was born in 1952 because that's what his birth certificate says. But when I was doing research, I came across a picture of my father with my great-grandmother and his brothers from 1947 from a whaler. And in his diary, he mentioned my dad. So my dad was born at least in 1945, but we don't know exactly when. We just know it was in December because of the way it was, and because it was during the dark months. You know how I mentioned, like right now, the sun doesn't really go down, but in the wintertime, it's always down. And this is the community that I come from. This is the community of Kangiqtugaapik. And this is where my father was moved to when he was about 10 or 11. We think he was 10 or 11. The house that I grew up in is right here. But as you can see, it's not a very big town. And when my father first moved here, there was only a few houses and the RCMP detachment and a school that was run by the ministers and the nuns. And funny story, everybody is comfortable being in a house, right? That said, my father was born in an igloo. So today, even still, he has a hard time being in a house that we live in today because he's not used to it. So when I was growing up, my father only spent about 10 to 20% of the year inside our home. The rest, he was always out on the land hunting and providing for our family. So this is Kangiqtugaapik. The school is over here. And to get to the next town, you can't drive there because it's on a little island. And the only way you can travel is by the ocean, by boat, or the Arctic sea ice by skidoo, or a iliqusik team, or by plane. And to get to the next community by plane, it's 1 hour away. So it's pretty far. And this is how it looks in the wintertime. This is like the most light that you'll see. As you can see, it's dusk. And a lot of people think that Inuit have a really hard time because we don't get to see the sun. But a really cool fact, you know how our vitamin D, if we have no sun, it's actually in our diet. A narwhal is those ones that look like a unicorn that have a big tusk. So that makes up for the vitamins that lack sun. So this is winter, about the end of February, and then this is December about, and then this is in the summertime. There was a picture that was supposed to show up with my father. Maybe we'll see it after. But this is in the summertime. So this is in like mid-July when all of the ice has melted. And as you can see, there's no flowers, how you see in the south. There's no trees. And it looks like a bunch of rocks and sand and dirt. But if you look closely, you can actually see there's a lot of plants and a lot of berries that grow on the ground. And a lot of times, like, let's say you go hunting for caribou meat, everything blends in. So when you live up here, it's like your eyes really have to adjust and learn how to really focus. It's really cool. Because as you live up here longer, I've heard a lot of people's eyesight and how they see the world start changing. Instead of just seeing rocks, you start seeing plants and berries and all those beautiful things. This river that you see right here is fresh water, the best water ever. And then it goes into this lake, and that's where the community gets the water supplies. Again, this is in the summertime in July. As you can see, there's still ice on the bay. Where I am right now in Inuktitut is south, so the ice will melt much faster, but where I come from, it takes a lot longer. And believe it or not, you can actually still go on this ice even though it looks like it's melting. It's about at least 2 feet thick. Crazy, isn't it? This is how we travel. As I mentioned, so this is the Qamutik, and it is a skidoo takes it and then it pulls it. This was actually taken in February or in March because I took a long trip by skidoo. I was driving this with a khamutik for 1,000 kilometers on the Arctic sea ice, which was pretty crazy because this year they said it was one of the coldest winters Inuit have ever recorded in the past 75 to 100 years. So this winter, the average temperature was 50 to 60, like minus 50, minus 60. So it was super, super, super cold, but it was a very beautiful ride. There seems to be a lot of slides missing. I don't know what's happening, but this was taken just yesterday. And again, there's the Arctic Ocean that's frozen, and then the dog team and the Qikiqtaaluk and 4 girls that we took out on the Qikiqtaaluk. It's kind of crazy if you think about it, isn't it? I'm going to Ottawa next week, and I can't imagine going to a place where there's going to be no ice and it's going to get dark. So this is the view that you get when you're on the Qikiqtaaluk. These are our dogs, again, on the ice. And this is how it looks right now. And as you can see, it's starting to melt. So right now, if we go out, it's very wet. And some puddles, because the cracks haven't come up yet, some puddles go up to our knee when we're on the snowmobile. So it's very warm and it's very beautiful. And this time next week, you'll be able to see lots of cracks in the ice where a lot of people are going to go fishing. And the communities make such a good time out of it. It's beautiful. I don't know where the rest of my slides went, which is really weird because I wanted to show you guys a picture of my father. And there were pictures of him when he was a baby that was recorded. I don't know where they went, but I would like to go. Oh, there's my father. I don't know why it's not showing. So this is my father. His name is Joshua Illauq, but he was called a number until he was in his 30s by the federal government because the government officials, so the RCMP and the Hudson's Bay Company and the church didn't know how to say Kautak. So they gave him a number of E5239. And he had to wear a necklace every single day. And they would look at his necklace instead of calling him by his name. And this was going on until he was in his 30s. So Inuit take a lot of pride in our name, especially because it was almost taken away and it was replaced by just numbers. So in Inuit naming traditions, our names carry a lot of responsibility and weight, and it shows what our duties are within our community. So I have 9 names, and each of my 9 names have different relationships with people. So because of my name, Kananna, my father doesn't treat me like his daughter, he treats me like his mom. And that's a pretty funny concept to a lot of people. But that's a lot how Inuit have been able to survive with generation to generation is through our responsibilities, through our names. So naming is very important. Even still today, my father still writes and signs with his E number because it's been embedded in him. Because when he was little, when he was about your age, when he was going to school, He wasn't allowed to talk, and he wasn't allowed to do anything. And the only thing that he had was his number, his identity that was given to him. Yeah, my dad's pretty cool though. You can't see, but he's missing one eye, and his back he's missing discs in his back, and his feet don't work as well as they used to because he was in the ocean for a very long time when a bowhead whale broke our boat, and he has arthritis. So my dad is a real Inuk, a real person from the Qikiqtaaluk, from the Arctic. And he still fights polar bears. Can you believe it? He still does. When my parents were getting engaged, my father actually killed a polar bear with his hands and a knife to give to my mother as an engagement present. And today, he still hunts a lot, even though he's really old and he's in a lot of pain and he can't really see. But last year, during August, because that's when the polar bears come out, because they're very overpopulated. There's so many of them that they're coming closer to human beings and attacking people. So last August, I got a call at midnight from my father saying that he's okay. And I was like, what do you mean? You know? And he started telling me the story of when he was hunting with his two cousins who also over 70 years old. And one of them is deaf and the other one can't really walk. They went caribou hunting and they still do it the old style way where they go by foot and they put the caribou on the backs, right, as a backpack. And my dad was the last person that had to look around the camp after they came back from caribou hunting to see if there were any polar bears anywhere. So he was looking and he didn't see any. So he went down to the tent and he was the last person to eat. And his last cousin went outside to go bury the bones of the steaks that they had. And my dad started wondering where his cousin was, you know? And his other cousin that's deaf was sitting right beside him. And then my dad could hear rocks moving a little bit. So my dad went out and he went to go see what was happening. And he saw his cousin on the ground with the polar bear on top. And the polar bear had slapped his face, so it opened up a little bit and he was unconscious. But my father thought he had passed away. So my dad tried to get a stick and got a stick and started hitting the polar bear. And the polar bear wouldn't do anything because it was a teenager boy that was just wanting to eat. And my dad was yelling for his other cousin to grab the gun to scare the polar bear away. But of course, his other cousin was deaf. So they started fighting, you know, my dad and the polar bear. And finally, my dad's cousin had a feeling something wasn't right. So he showed up with a rifle and gazed the polar bear, and the polar bear got scared and ran away. But these are the sort of things my dad still does today. And it's pretty cool if you guys can imagine your grandparents or your great-grandparents grew up with the radio, even maybe, or at least a house and roads. But my father grew up with the snow, the land, with no outside influence for the first years of his life. Isn't that cool? I think that's very cool. I wanted to go back to this because it's really, I think a lot of people forget that Inuit are a part of Canada or Inuit even exist. And there's actually lots of Inuit everywhere. But the really cool thing about Inuit is that there's not that many of us. There's only about 35,000 Inuit. and our language and everything is starting to disappear, and our ways of being and stuff. But as soon as we start working together, like all of our communities, and we start going back to helping each other, we can overcome anything. So right now, that's actually happening in this region, the region that I am from, where our language is still being very much used and our culture and our traditions are still being practiced. But it's really, really cool to think that there is a place like this just north of everybody, right? North of you guys, with snow everywhere, with no trees, and we're in the same country. You know, when I was a little girl, the elders raised me. So the generation that raised my father raised me too. And they would always tell me that how important it is that Inuit always work together, because without each other, we can never survive. We always, always need each other. Camp, go hunting without having a family to provide for or to be able to talk to. And the hunter can't go hunting if the hunter doesn't have a home, right? And the wife, the seamstress, or somebody who is sewing the tupik, the tent, can't sew anything without the patch of the hunter with the skins and everything. And these are the values that I was brought up with, for everybody to always look eye to eye instead of thinking that you are better than anybody. And it's really hard right now, I think, with social media, right? And I see it in my daughter's life too, where it's so easy to be mean, and it's so easy to judge, and it's so easy to put each other down all the time. But we're not really helping each other grow when we do that. And as soon as we start going back to the basics of helping each other, everything always becomes better and bigger. And the opportunities that we give ourselves become much, much more. These are the values that I was brought up to believe and to live by. And when I see this community, because it wasn't here just 60 years ago, this was not exist. It did not exist. And I look at all of these homes that have many families in them. And I say many families because in one house, in a 3-bedroom house, there might be 2 to 3 families living in there, because there's a shortage of houses up there, because all of the houses need to be brought up by ship, like all of the building material by ship, and it's only once a year. So you can't go to Home Depot or anything to go get your building supplies. But I look at these houses with a few families in them, and in just a short period of time, Inuit, my family, have learned how to adapt and to coexist in a small community, when not that long ago they traveled with the land. So that's pretty cool, I think. I think it's very cool. But it goes back to togetherness. My community could have never survived if my community tried to do things on their own and not help each other. And as a kid, I really saw this. So if you go back to this and you really look, like, you know how I said they're an hour by plane, so they're very far. But when I was younger, during this time of year, when there's still ice, we would pack our kamutik and we would put a boat on it, and we would travel far from the community in the middle of nowhere on a little island with a couple other families. And we would spend the whole summer there until there was no ice and we were able to take the boat home. So imagine being on a little island and there's no store, there's no bathroom, there's no toilet, there's no bathtub, no shower, no mirrors, nothing, 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 nothing. It just looks like this in the middle of nowhere. And you put up a tent and you're stuck with family. And they're not going to help you because no roads people can come to and the place is too dangerous to travel. So we're literally alone. So what happens if you run out of food? Well, you can't bring a lot of food because that's a lot of weight you would put on the Qikiqtaaluk. So what about your tent and your sleeping stuff and your clothes and all that stuff? So you got to go hunting in order to survive. But one year we ran out of food and everybody got really, really hungry to the point where like there wasn't even any more dog food. People at the camp had already eaten all of the dog food. And the hunters would go out every day to go and try to get some food. There was none because it was a time when it was really difficult. But you know what happened? Everybody in the camp decided to work together and go together to go hunting instead of going one person here, one person there. And they were able to catch a seal, which was very unusual for that particular time in that particular area. But that day that the hunters were going to go, they absolutely believed that they were going to go get some food before their families starved and got really ill. So when they came back, everybody feasted and everybody started to feel better, of course, because seal has a lot of nutrients. And just a handful of seal, you can actually feel very full because it has the body needs to survive. But I remember looking at everybody and being so because nobody was each other and nobody was putting each other down. Everybody was really hungry and survival, but everybody helped each other, you know. But it's little things like that in life that has taught me how important it is to show other. Because never ever know who is going through what or what that person has gone through or where they come from. Like if you guys saw me in, I don't know, on the subway or something, would you guys have ever guessed that I come from a place like this and I don't like to be in the city and that I had all these crazy stories of learning how to hunt when I was 4 or going through skidoo accidents when I was like 10 because I was silly and decided to go racing. But I think it's a great teacher and lesson in life when we practice kindness. Because when we practice it and when we really have to show it, it can save lives. It truly can. And the power of positivity that goes in your mind and your heart and your entire being can have a very powerful impact. So powerful that you can live in an environment like this that looks like there's nothing. But as soon as you start opening your eyes and beautifully want to coexist with everything, you start seeing what everything has to offer. But that's the same with people, our human connectedness. We're all very important and we all have a story and a role we must follow. That's what I believe anyway. questions so far? Anything at all? I don't know how this works with the questions.
We have lots of questions coming in. So yeah, if you want to do questions, we could do that.
Let's do it.
Okay.
Because normally it takes a long time.
So, and for those, if you're wondering, again, just a reminder, there's a form link in the description box below that you can access. You click on the link and then you put in your question. And I apologize, I realized originally there's a section on the form link that asks for your grade. And there was a mistake on that. So some people were not able to put in their grade. Sorry about that. But it is fixed. So moving forward, we'll be able to see those. But anyway, please put your questions in using that form and we'll bring them forward to Aliqa. So the first question we have here is from the school is called EVS, and the question is, how warm does it get in Iqaluit in the summer? I think you answered it, but just if you want to review that again.
Okay. So you guys know about global warming. Everybody knows about global warming. And I am going to show you guys a picture. Okay, mountains. Was growing up, glacier really way down because the temperatures wouldn't reach, it wouldn't get as hot as plus 16, plus 17 would be like the hottest. Now, some days, last year, one day it was recorded to be plus 32. Like that's more than double. So in Iqaluit, so remember how I said Iqaluit is further. Iqaluit on average reaches about plus 15 to plus 25 during the summertime now, which is also very, very warm, but you get really hot days too, where it reaches 20s, 30s. So global warming, we do really feel it. And even in my lifetime alone, I can totally see the glaciers melting and winters being really different. When I was younger, when there was a snowstorm, snow would cover our house and it was a two-story. And on the road, there would be very big mountains of snow, where the town would completely be closed because there was no way in going down the road. And the snow drifts would be way bigger. They would be like 10, 15 feet high. So that doesn't happen anymore. And it's a lot warmer.
Yeah, it's kind of scary to think about the extreme changes. I think that in the urban centers, we don't feel the changes as much as places like where you're living.
Right. And here's a really fun fact. So you know how glaciers are like thousands and thousands of years old? Well, they're melting. And because all the insects and stuff just went in and they froze and they started hibernating or whatever you call it, they're starting to come out. So there's insects that are as big as the prehistoric era, like mosquitoes that are massive. Like there's, because of the melting glaciers, and we're not talking about this. And a fun fact, it's not the polar bears that are getting affected, because polar bears can actually swim like really good. They're actually considered like a sea mammal almost, because some even prefer the water. But so the polar bears don't need the ice to survive. They can even go swimming and dive underwater and go hunting for narwhals and seals and fish. But like we should be talking about the insects and the new plants even that are starting to come up, because there's plants that are popping up that had never been there before, especially because the ground is so frozen. it's ice after 2 feet. Like you can't dig anymore. Well, that's how they used to be, but now you can dig. It's crazy.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, because I don't think a lot of people know or even realize the impacts on all of these things.
Right?
The next question here is from Silver Pines Public School, and they're just, I know you've mentioned it, but maybe you could share a little bit more about your beautiful language. Tell us about your language.
Oh, Inuktitut, it's very old. So if you look at the map again, each town actually has their own style or dialect of Inuktitut. So like over here, it would be Inunaktuk, what we call it. So in general, our language, it's called Inuktitut, but Inuktitut is a very rich, and you know how the alphabet has 26 letters? Inuktitut has 72 syllabics, and it's by like, what do you call it? It's by sound, like each of our letters, I guess, is by sound. So like E, P, T, K, and it's just made up of those 72 sounds. Inuktitut is apparently really hard to learn. You know how, like, a lot of people that have tried to learn Japanese or Mandarin have said that Inuktitut is just as hard, because if you mispronounce even a little bit, you can change the entire meaning word. Like, it's crazy. So you have to be like very precise in how you pronounce it. Let me teach you guys a word. So you could say sugit, which means welcome. So tungasugit, tungasugit. And instead of saying hi, tungasugit, and instead of saying hi, we always say welcome. So welcome to this relationship that we're entering. Welcome to my space. It's very welcoming. So tungasugit, welcome. But Inuktitut is cool. It was my first language. I didn't learn how to speak English until I was in grade 4. So I had a hard time with English, but Inuktitut is very cool. And fun fact about Inuktitut, there's no labels. We don't say he or she or Mr. We say none of that. Instead, when we're talking about somebody, we talk about how we're in relation with that person or how much they mean to us. And of course, with their name. But yeah, Inuktitut is very different than English or French.
Thank you for sharing that. Another question here is from Walnut Grove Public School. How do you know when the ice is too thin to walk or be on? What signs do you use?
That's a very good question. It's actually the color of the ice that you can see. So you see how this part's darker? I can see it, but it means this part's open water. It's not a crack. It doesn't mean, like, if it was a crack, it would mean that it's going to be thinner on both, but it's not a crack. So it's just open water. So this part could be like 1 foot thick, but with the ice, it's all with the way it looks like. It's like we're trained as children, because when part of our like upbringing and everything is completely based on survival. So our stories and how we're taught is based on survival. So even games are based on survival. So when I was younger, we break as kids start jumping on to the next, and then we would have to try to find our way back. And at any moment, the pieces of ice that we were on could flip. And of course, the ocean could suck us in, and then, you know, it's very dangerous. But they make a game out of it, and it's like teaching us how to survive and how to tell the difference of the colors and the characteristics of the ice. Polar bears, because of the way their feet are and they're webbed, they can actually walk on paper thin ice, which is also received for bear hunting, or if you're following a polar bear. And they can, with the way that they walk, no matter how heavy they are, it's really neat how they can go on very thin ice. But learning how to read the ice is a very lifelong skill. And it's very cool in how you can learn to be connected to the ice and the different elements of the ice and the water to notice. I don't know if I answered your question good, but
That's incredible. I had no idea about the polar bear feet. That's wild.
Isn't it?
Yeah, there's so much. I love these questions that are coming in. So another question from EVS school, grade 7 class. So now the grades are working. Okay, so what do you do in the winter when your water source is frozen? And also they want to let you know, by the way, this presentation is wonderful.
Amazing. That's a really good question. I should have taken a picture, but so houses are on stilts, so they're off the ground, and we have no basement. And a lot of the houses in communities are sewage, so a big tank to put our dirty water, so toilet water, shower water, dishwater, everything is put in a tank that is heated, either outside of the house or at the bottom of the house. And a truck comes and it sucks all of the poop and everything out through a truck, and then it gets taken to a lagoon. And that's the same with water. Each source comes and it water, and then the truck would drive, and then it would take the water into a hose outside, and then would dump the water to a big tank that is at the house. So, you know what happens in the winter if there's a lot of, what do you call it, snowstorms, and the truck can't go anywhere? You have no access to water. You have no more water house. And a lot of times you can't even flush your toilet because your sewage is backed up because it hasn't been picked up. So every time you turn on a tap, it's precious water up here. You can't just turn on the tap or have a 10-15 minute shower, because your water, like any moment, you can run out, and then you have no water for a few days, depending on the weather. Isn't that insane? And I thought that was normal when I was growing up. Like, I thought you had to conserve water all the time. Yeah, that's not the case.
No, we really take advantage here of, these luxuries that we become so accustomed to, and then we just think this is normal and an expected way. And then, you know, I think that the problem with that is then we don't appreciate things like water that are so precious.
Exactly.
That we need to really be more respectful of.
Right.
Yeah. So next question here is from Tommy Douglas Secondary School. And their question is, what do you think the Canadian government can do to support the preservation of your language and culture?
That is such a great question. You know, a lot of people that make laws that concern other people, like when the federal government makes a law, they don't really know about certain things, right? Because there's nobody in the federal government that is making policies and laws that speak Inuktitut. So they don't understand how to preserve it. They just understand that we need to be Canadians and we need to act like Canadians. Like from the ones from the north are the same from like Toronto area, which is not the same because our environments are very different. So what can the Canadian government do? And what do you think they can do? I think that everybody that is a part of the Canadian government are all human beings. They're all people. So instead of looking at it from a government perspective, if we looked at everything from a human perspective and said, okay, we as humans need to be able to communicate based on the environment that we're on. Okay, that's important, right? So what can the Canadian government do? We can go back to being a human being and start listening to each other. You know, right now, in Iqaluit, the capital of Nunavut, French and English have more right than Inuktitut. There is a French school, there is an English school, but there is no Inuktitut school. And when students speak Inuktitut in the school, they get punished. And we're not allowed to speak our language on our own lands. So it goes back to that humanness again, right? Like it's a lot more complicated, but if we just learned how to listen to each other and respect each other's difference, I think it can go a very long way. And it goes back to that being kind and being open to each other. But that is such a great question. And that are topics about language and our culture that I always try to promote, to say that even though I speak a different language and my father can't really speak English, it doesn't mean that he's a less of a person. It just means we communicate differently because we're all different and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, and I think you know, as students, as you're learning about these things, you know, you also have a powerful voice in advocacy as well. So when you hear things like the struggle to even have access to our own languages, you know, get behind that and, you know, be vocal about, you know, having those rights to access to language. Because, and the other thing is, I also think, like, imagine if, you know, if you suddenly just got up and moved to another country, you would probably learn their language and speak their language. But that's not what's happened here. So we've had other people come here and brought their languages here, English and French, and then have made it very, very difficult for the Indigenous peoples here to have access to our languages.
Or even to survive. Like it goes back to that, okay, have you guys ever heard that there are over 30 words for snow in Inuktitut? Okay, it's not necessarily snow, it's also the ice, it's this condition. And when somebody asked, how do you know when it's really thin? It's actually in our language too, that we cannot explain it in English. It just takes one word in Inuktitut to save somebody's life, to say, no, sakto, it's too thin. All I would have to say is sakto, you know, it explains exactly where it is, how it's going to be, and save a life. In English, I would have to overly explain that one little concept into many, many words. So it's also, our survival also depends on our language because it is very interconnected with the environment. You cannot separate our language, any language in the world, from the environment that is impossible, you know?
Absolutely. So it's the same for where I'm from. So the language where I'm from is Anishinaabemowin, and it's the exact same thing. And the incredible knowledge that comes from these languages are mind-blowing. mind-blowing. So, it's good. It's a good thing to learn, if you're going to live in somebody's homelands, we really should be learning the language of the homelands that you're living in, because it has everything you need, like you were saying, to survive. All of our pharmacology, we didn't need to go to Shoppers Drug Mart. We went out and we knew what we needed to do to get what we needed to get. So, anyway, let's get back to these questions because there's only a couple minutes left. So, I'm going to go to Aurora Heights Public School, grade 6. Have there ever been very big storms where you used to live, or I'm going to add on where you're currently living now? Is there a storm that stands out extra for you?
So where I come from, Kangiqtugaapik. Kangiqtugaapik means beautiful little inlet in Inuktitut. And it's called the storm capital of Nunavut. And like the regular winter of the storm that I come from shakes your house, literally. And some houses have actually been destroyed, and that's a normal winter day. Now growing up, even still today, the winds go up to 120 kilometers per hour. That's crazy. So a lot of times, because the storms are so much and the only way to get to town is by airplane, and for our fruits and our vegetables and our food that the store is going to sell comes through the plane too, there are times where there's no more food at the grocery store because it's so stormy. But that's an everyday winter day where I come from. And in Iqaluit, it's very different because it's the capital and big jets come and there's a lot of stores here. And it's very modern compared to the place where I come from. And the location of Iqaluit doesn't have a lot of storms like where I come from. So yeah, snowstorms and everything is every day during winter. It makes very strong. And because there are times where you go like this and you can't even see your hand because it's storming so much. There's so much snow and you can't see your hand. So you have to learn to trust your instincts just to walk from one house to the other or to navigate through the outside because you can get lost. So it's a lot of trust in yourself when it comes to those storms. Great question, though.
Well, we have pretty much come to the end of our time here. So if there's any wrap up last minute words you want to share with everyone listening and watching.
I just want to say Qikiqtaaluk. Thank you. Qikiqtaaluk. Thank you very much to everybody that was listening for a whole hour. And I hope you guys never forget how amazing and beautiful each and every one of you are. We have all been created to be here right now during this time. And always choose love and kindness, no matter what, towards everything and everybody. But Qikiqtaaluk.
Beautiful. Thank you, Aliqa. And thank you everyone for watching today. And, I'm sure everyone has taken a little bit of new knowledge away. And we really encourage you to keep learning about the beautiful peoples and the beautiful humans that are from all over these parts of the lands